now at some presentations. What's next for regional innovation and the lessons that can be learned from Europe's research frontline. So we're going to look a little bit at a couple of projects, what's happening, what's still to come, how they interlink, and there'll be, of course, as always, the opportunity for questions. We're going to hear first about the MOBI-TWIN project and then about the Replace project, and Peter will be here to bring in Premium EU's relevance or interlaceness with that for the question point. So I'm going to hand over to Anastasia Panori for a presentation on the MOBI-TWIN project. Thank you.
So, hi everyone. I'm Anastasia Panori. I'm the scientific coordinator of the MOBI-TWIN project, which is a sister project from the same call, funded under the same call, together with Premium EU and Replace project. We have a different perspective, and I think it relates well to the previous discussion about relational attractiveness. As I was keep hearing the previous discussion, I also better understood our perspective, how our project relates to this three sister approach of similar projects. So our main idea, let's say, is to see, we have three main questions. The first one, we wanted to see how this whole twin transition affects mobility patterns. So the first thing that we tried to do in the MOBI-TWIN project was to develop the different mobility types. We are not focusing on migration that much, but we have a broader perspective on mobility, changing mobility patterns. And we thought that it would be very nice to see how the different types of movements relate to places. So the first thing that we did is to identify the 7 different types, mobility types, and see how they spread out through the European regions. So after that, after we somehow harmonized different data sources in order to see the flows between European regions, we wanted to see how what are the different drivers of these different mobility types. So because we had the idea that different mobility types and different drivers affecting mobility types required different approaches, policy responses, in order to make them, to turn them competitive advantages within regions. So after harmonizing the data and having data for the different mobility flows, we wanted to identify different drivers, as I said before. But because the main focus of MOBI-TWIN was on twin transition, we tried to have the perspective of traditional factors, green factors, and digital factors, and how these three different sources of, let's say, motives affect mobility decisions at the individual level. Starting from traditional factors, and what we have seen until now, the analysis has shown that work-related mobilities are traditional factors dominate in work-related mobility. So when someone wants to decide where to go, when he or she searches for a job, he will definitely look at traditional factors, as we know. But we have green and digital factors coming into the scene when we are talking about the different motives, when we try to define motives in terms of mobility. I think Becky said at some point that you also found that quality of life is an aspect that comes up when we move after 30 or something, or 35 or something. So we found the same thing. So when we talk about quality of life and green factors related to quality of life, we relate these factors. Green factors start to play a significant role when we're talking about mobilities in relation to not older populations, but mid-life, populations with families. So this is where green factors start to become significant. And also, these were regions that have active circular economy employment and low emissions seem to be able to potentially attract new residents, especially after their 30s or 35 years old. And finally, when it comes to digital factors, we see that that kind of competitive advantages, let's say at the regional level, they play a significant role where we're talking about skilled populations, and also we have also evidence that digital factors play a significant role when we are talking about mobility of persons who are in retirement. So people who want to move and they are in retirement, they choose to go to places that they have okay, higher quality of life. They choose rural places, but also they want to be digitally connected. Most probably because they have families and they want to be connected with their families and other opportunities to attend their social lives. After that, moving on from the individual level and how the traditional green and digital factors affect mobility choices and intentions, what we wanted to see is that we saw that the green and the digital factors are significant in some cases, in some mobility types. We wanted to start defining this regional attractiveness, this relational regional attractiveness, as it was discussed previously. So we started building a regional attractiveness index for the European regions, including not only traditional factors that have been used in the previous studies, but also green and digital factors. Let's say when we talk about factors, these green and digital factors describe the digital and the green readiness, let's say, of regions, of European regions, during the twin transition. So we were able to first of all, calculate this regional attractiveness index at the NATS2 level starting from 2010 until 2022. And we developed 6 different regional typologies at the European level. So in this map, you can see how these different typologies spread across Europe. And we can say that there is definitely a spatial pattern in the distribution of these clusters across Europe. On the right side, you can also see the differences in how well the different clusters perform in the overall regional attractiveness index, the digital, the traditional, and the green factors. So what we can see here is that when it comes to the green factors, there are some differences between the 6 identified clusters, but there are not significant differences. But the main differences arising at the European level of the European regions come mainly from the digital and the traditional factors framing the readiness during the twin transition. And because we wanted somehow to all this information and all this data and the outcomes of this analysis to be accessible for everyone, we created 2 dashboards. The first one, you can use the QR codes. The first one refers to the RISE scores, a more detailed, if you want to have a more detailed analysis of the regional attractiveness index, you can visit the first dashboard and you can see how well each region performs compared to its other regions in the same country. So we have some comparisons in the different dimensions of the regional attractiveness index, and we have a second dashboard trying to try to present the findings and the SWOT analysis for each cluster, the cluster typologies at the European level, and how these clusters developed over time in terms of their attractiveness, green, digital, and traditional attractiveness. And as a final step, what we building on these 2 individual and regional perspectives, individual perceptions and the regional readiness, we wanted to perform some forecasting analysis in order to see how policies related to the twin transition may affect the population forecast and synthesis of the population in different scenarios. So we used 2 different approaches on that. The first one, we use spatial microsimulation model and agent-based modeling in order to see how the different populations may evolve through a 10-year perspective from now. You can see here, I just put an example on the presentation on the left side, so you can see how the agent-based modeling forecasts the population growth or decline when applying in 4 different scenario types and by applying twin transition policies or not. What we have seen is that when we apply the twin transition policies, let's say, in almost all cases we see that the population forecasts are better than expected. But in cases that the scenarios are bad and we don't apply twin transition policies, we see that there might be also, instead of having a population growth, we might result in a population decline in a specific region. And as a final, in parallel to this, in this agent-based modeling approach, we also try to do some simulations in order to see how the poverty and inequality measures may evolve in the future. In our pilot cases, we have 5 pilot cases. And for this reason, we use the Euromod model to run the scenarios and test and see the outcomes, how what the structure of the population will be in 2035 in the 4 different, the baseline and the 4 different scenarios. I will not get in more detail, of course, because I don't have much time. I think I'm on time. Now we're in the process. The project, I have to say that the project started just a little bit after the premium EU, so we're in the final steps of the project, and we're trying to do the policy analysis and the policy recommendations. For this reason, we have already performed 5 regional policy labs. There are 5, not 4. I just forgot the last one from Northern Netherlands. And now, very soon, in 9 days from now, we will have the cross-regional policy lab. I invite you all to scan the QR code and participate. It's going to be fully participatory. Everyone can participate on the discussion. We will present the analysis and the comparison between the different policy, the outcomes of the different policy labs that we performed, and see how we can communicate it to a broader perspective in different EU regions. So it will be online. You can register, and of course we will be glad to have you all in order to share your thoughts and your experiences from your regional perspectives. I would like to thank you all. That was a very short presentation. I tried to be as more precise as I could for the project. Of course, you can visit our site where you can find more information and more outcomes of the project. The project ends in May, and we'll have our final event. And feel free to ask us. I'm here. I'm the scientific coordinator. We also have Julia Zendron, which is the technical coordinator of the project. And feel free to ask us for more information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anastasia, and feel free to ask our questions after we finished our presentations as well. Our second presentation is on the Replace project, and for that we will have Jennifer McGarrigle Carvalho.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and congratulations to the Premium team for such an inspiring day. I think I've certainly learned a lot. And I'm really happy to have this opportunity to present a little bit about the Replace project. So Replace is a project that examines how spatial mobility shapes the trajectory of declining peripheral areas across Europe, and how mobility can be harnessed to support alternative locally grounded development. And we, to do this, we're using a participative methodology. So today I want to give you a brief overview of what we've done so far, what we still have to do, because we still have a year left of the project, slightly less than a year, so we're a little bit behind MOBI-TWIN and Premium. And also it would be really nice to think a little bit about how Replace connects with the work of MOBI-TWIN and Premium as well, and how we can go forward in the sort of afterlife of the project. So let me just tell you a little bit about what we've done so far. All of our work has really been orientated toward understanding life at a very fine spatial scale, so in towns and villages in peripheral areas that are experiencing demographic decline and human development deficits. But to reach that local level and to work with local residents, we needed quite a rigorous framework for identifying and selecting our study areas. So a core challenge for us in the project was identifying and classifying places in decline across the 6 Replace countries, which I should have said before, Portugal, Spain, Latvia, Germany, Romania and Italy. This was one of the core challenges. So to address this, we developed a local human development index at the LAU level, so at quite a fine spatial scale. And this index is a composite measure that integrates economic, socio-human, and health capitals to try and capture the multidimensional nature of local disadvantage. So while the project is fundamentally designed to operate at quite a fine spatial scale to understand the broader territorial context, we also developed a regional human development index, and this was constructed at the NUTS 3 level, which enabled us to sort of systematically analyse the relationship between local conditions and the local human development index and also their regional setting. And obviously, and this is important because we aim to situate local decline within wider patterns of territorial inequality. We also conducted a large-scale representative survey of over 12,000 people across the 6 countries, but I think I'm going to skip that just now because I don't want to run out of time, but I can tell you a little bit about that in the questions afterwards. So drawing on the local and regional human development index typology, we selected 12 case study areas to conduct immersive fieldwork. We deliberately chose areas with contrasting development profiles, so less developed places within less developed EU regions, and places with low, which you can see in the bottom of this matrix, and also places with low local indices in more developed regions, and places with relatively stronger local assets, but that are really sort of nestled within weaker regional contexts. Across these 12 different areas, we conducted intensive qualitative fieldwork. We interviewed experts, policymakers, business community, civil society, and also we interviewed around 500 residents, including both long-term immobile households, which actually are very difficult to find because most people in these areas have some experience with mobility. And also we interviewed newcomers, so internal migrants and international migrants as well. And through these interviews, our goal was to try to understand migratory trajectories, also livelihood practices, and also really the kind of micro strategies that people use to build a life at the periphery. We also spoke with people who had left, who had out-migrated, to try and understand sort of what drove their decision to leave, and then also what might possibly bring them back in the future as well. So from this work, we identified 4 distinct mobility clusters, each with different dynamics, and also each with different policy implications as well. So the policy toolbox that we hope to develop in the last phase of the project really sort of will try to speak to this diversity. I'll just run through this really quickly because I know that I probably don't have that much time. I'm okay. So the first cluster in our mobility clusters are areas that have persistent out-migration with limited return. These are places that are depopulating fast. People leave, very few people come back, and those who do come back often come back through accumulative ties rather than a sort of active choice. And residents in these areas that we interviewed very much sort of described a vicious circle that we heard before, where each departure sort of erodes the infrastructure and services that might have sort of retained the next person. The second cluster is very much characterised by labour in migration, intra-European and also international. So in these areas, incoming labour migrants in agriculture or industry are sustaining local economies by substituting for a declining workforce. Yet in these areas, while oftentimes the economic indicators may look sort of relatively healthier, this hasn't necessarily resolved the structural mismatch. So young locals continue to leave, also housing pressures are mounting, and social tensions can emerge. So these are places where we're seeing also the emergence of anti-migration discourse as well. In the third cluster that we have identified and that we're studying is related with circular and seasonal mobility. So here mobility is shaped rather with patterns of circular seasonal work, migration abroad, but with very sort of strong family and community ties promoting regular return. In this cluster, people construct hybrid livelihoods where they sort of combine earnings from elsewhere with continued residence in their home area. So there's a kind of a coexistence of mobility and attachment. And in the last cluster that we're working in is more related with lifestyle and amenity flows, but with continued out-migration, youth out-migration as well. So these are places that still experience very acute ageing, continuing a youth departure due to sort of limited local education and employment opportunities. But at the same time, these areas are managing to attract lifestyle migrants who are drawn by nature, amenity, quality of life. Also the possibility of remote working really helps as well. So I think this has kind of created a real, even if a kind of fragile opening for economic and social innovation. But it requires obviously deliberate policy to ensure that incoming residents and local communities sort of generally benefit together. Now, the second phase of the project is really what we're doing next. And in this, building on the research that we've done, and also on the relationships that we've developed in each of the case study areas across the 6 replace countries, we're now starting to implement village labs in each of the areas. And village labs really are sort of participatory co-creation spaces where we want to bring together residents, newcomers, long-term residents, local policymakers, businesses, and also researchers. So we want to work together to identify challenges and design locally grounded solutions. So it has a very place-based objective. And beginning in April, we'll hold 2 village labs in each of our 12 case study areas. So the process will move through 4 different stages. First, we'll bring back our research findings for communities to review and also to interrogate. This is an important point for us. Second, local actors will prioritise challenges and begin co-designing responses as well. Third, we hope to have a series of translocal meta labs to compare results across areas and try and distill shared lessons, because there's a danger, of course, we're trying to work at a very local level, but also we want to be able to scale up and provide a policy toolbox that can be implemented more widely. So all of this will feed into Policy Toolbox, which will be a set of adaptable strategies for rural and peripheral areas, like I said, that hopefully will be able to travel beyond our specific contexts. And also we will hold policy roundtables at national level and also at the EU level with the results from the Policy Toolbox, hopefully to get your feedback as well. So really our goal is not so much to impose solutions from the outside, but to try and build on existing local knowledge, resources, and also networks as well. In parallel, we also, which I'm not going to go into in detail, but in parallel, I just want to mention, because some people have talked about new representations, reframing, place representations of areas in decline. So we're trying to develop visual representations of these places through a web doc, because we really sort of think that how areas in decline are seen and narrated really matters for how they're valued and ultimately for how policy responds to them. So I'll stop there, and thank you very much for your attention. Sorry, I won't stop there. I just want to advertise, and I promise this is the last slide. We're going to have a webinar or an online seminar on Tuesday the 24th of March, and we would be absolutely delighted if you joined us. We'll be presenting some results, and also Becky Arnold, who you heard speak earlier, will also present some more results from the Premium project, and we'll also have a roundtable with policymakers working in some of the areas that we're studying. So thank you so much for your attention. That's it for me.
So thank you both very much, and also still here on the stand is Peter Meister-Broekema from Premium EU. So let's see if there's any questions in the room straight away that you have for representatives here, for Peter, Anastasia or Jennifer. Any hands? I don't. It was that comprehensive. No one. Well, it may also be that we're reaching the end of the day and people are a little bit tired. But let me start by asking you, I'll start, Jennifer, with you, how these projects support each other and what are the points of nuance, and tell me a little bit more about the intersection between them.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, well, I think that we've had quite, maybe to the contrary of other experiences that I've had in the past, we've had quite a lot of dialogue really since sort of second year of the projects. And I think that for us at Replace, especially since we have a qualitative approach, a participatory approach that might be more difficult to disseminate or communicate in a really straightforward way, I think that there's a lot of potential. Even today, we haven't discussed this, but even today, sort of looking at the dashboard and at the qualitative component that the premium team has managed to weave into this, I hope that in some way we would be able to contribute to that as well through the work that we're doing in our case study areas. So I think that this is definitely something for continued dialogue and continued discussion.
Same question, Anastasia, to you. Where do you see the nuances between the different projects?
Well, also in our case, because a little bit more focused on the green and the digital transition, what we found very useful with all these interactions, as Jennifer said before, it was really nice to see that there were some cases where we got in the same results as the premium EU, especially because they also have a quantitative approach. And it was just like a validation, like external validation of our approach. This is very nice. And the fact that we had all these discussions amongst us, even online or informal discussions at some point, it was really helpful to recalibrate the overall approach, the more theoretical perspective of the project.
And then just as a follow-up, I mean, what are the key differentials? Because I'm presuming that's where the added value comes from.
The key differentials between the three projects?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, from what I see, we have Premium EU, which is more, let's say, generic and focused on the policy perspectives. Correct me if I'm mistaken. And it has a very strong migrant orientation and combines both quantitative and qualitative approaches. In the case of MOBI-TWIN, we focus mostly on the quantitative approach, and we have this special touch in terms of the green and the digital transition, so we try to see a little bit more this perspective on migration decisions and intentions to migrate. And then, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, we have the fully qualitative approach, more people-oriented approach from the Replace projects that brings additional information which cannot be brought by statistical data itself. So this is my perspective, at least.
Jennifer, I mean, you're agreeing. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that what struck me today really was also not so much what we all have different methodological approaches, but I think that what struck me today, and also in conversations with MOBI-TWIN as well, is that the way that we're thinking about decline is also changing. So despite the differences, we're thinking that sort of decline isn't necessarily destiny, it needs reframing. The goal doesn't necessarily have to be population growth. Some places sort of need to be supported to thrive at a smaller scale, with sort of stronger foundational services, with also a local economy and strong identities. And I think that, I mean, one of the areas that I was working in, I remember that one of the interviews said to me is that sometimes it's doing small well, and he's coming from an area that has bio regions and heavy rural innovation branding, but sometimes that doesn't necessarily sort of trickle down to increase the quality of life of local residents. So I think that sort of thinking about declining regions in a different way and trying to reframe it is something that I think that we've agreed on in the results that we've obtained.
Peter, let me bring you in to address a potential issue that it could be perceived that these projects are actually in competition. There's finite resources. How do we ensure that they're not actually drawing energy away from each other, but in fact that they're working in cohort?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I think in the beginning we were in competition, of course. I mean, I think 15 projects, I don't know how many submitted a proposal, and the 3 of us all got the money. But I think, and it's been said before, but I think we were really on a journey together in this. I've been in but I've been in a few Euro Horizon projects. What you often see is that people, well, they meet now and then, they share some results, but that's basically it. But now we had monthly meetings and really discussing both the science but also the communication part. And I think it really made our own research stronger. And I think that's for everybody. And what I really enjoyed, it's been said before, like maybe Premium was a little bit more generic, and we were focusing, shooting with Hill, trying to get all the migration, all the policies, all the regions. But so that's on a really high up level. And on the other side, we also did a lot of migrant interviews, and we also did a lot of policy labs, etc. But in between, and I think this is where you also did a great job looking at specific regions, looking at specific transitions, and I think the whole package together can really help regions as well. And what I really like is, for example, and we didn't dare to do this, but the policy forecasting, which is kind of experimental and also kind of exciting. So I think that's something we could actually learn from each other. So for now, we're happily collaborating, but in the future, who knows? Huh? So, but it was a great journey. That is what I want to stress here. Yeah.
Good. Let me ask again, anyone got questions for our speakers or thoughts they want to share with them to get a reaction? I'm not seeing any. Oh, go on then, Sandra. Thank you.
I got a question on impact measurement from the Replace project. You were saying that the project still goes on for a year, that the next steps are the policy labs locally in the villages. I was just wondering what the outcomes of these are, whether you're going to issue a report with recommendations, whether you're going to measure the take-up of any of the work as well in the case study regions you're working with.
Can I go ahead? Of course. Sorry. Thank you, Sandra, that's a really excellent question, and that's something that we're pondering over now, obviously, as we come to the end of the project. From the village labs in each of the areas, we will only have a 5 or 6 month period between when they finish and when the project finishes. So I think that the work that we can do in terms of impacts will be quite limited. We're trying to design the village labs in each of the areas to create some kind of sustainability. It won't be possible in all of the areas that we're working in because of sort of different infrastructural deficits or other reasons. But hopefully working closely with local authorities and with local civic society and business community, we're hoping to design or to develop some of them at least in infrastructures that are already existing that will support their lifespan beyond the end of the project. But in terms of having the time and capacity to measure impacts, the time frame will be very limited because this will happen sort of a few months before the project ends. But it's something that we're pondering to see how we can perhaps do that in a more significant way in the future.
Thank you, and thanks for the question, Sandra. Anyone else before I ask Anastasia if you'd like to say anything that you feel you didn't say in your presentation because you were worried about time that you would have liked people to take away? And then Peter, yes.
And now I'm here, right? Huh? No, but what really struck me is that so I started this whole meeting today with we have to change the narrative, and I think this is something that really really relates to us all. We've heard this in different scenarios, people saying maybe decline isn't the end of everything. Maybe there are smart solutions. Maybe we could just rethink how we want to be. And we could rethink what rural life is, and we can rethink what livability of quality of life is. It's not only about jobs and economic development, but it's so much more. And I think that's something we all share here. So I was really happy to find out, actually.
Yes. I want just to add to what Peter and also Jennifer said before. What we have also seen in MOBI-TWIN project is that subjective well-being in population declining areas and aging areas is high. People are happy there. So this is a good thing, I suppose. So I don't think that these areas should be stigmatized or something. So we just have to let them be happy. And also permanent migration, trying to find solutions for people to permanently move there, I don't feel that this is also a solution. We have to think how different types of movements, either circular, short-term, even remote workers or something. From my perspective and the MOBI-TWIN perspective, I think this is a smart approach on trying to providing additional policies and solutions to these areas to flourish, let's say. So this is what I want.
Thank you, and that's a very optimistic point to wrap up this segment on. And thank you both indeed for coming along and sharing your presentations with us. One question.
When I see there are so many amazing projects, and I hope they are not competing, and they won't compete, because the worst thing is if different projects compete, and sometimes it's even in the Commission, different programs, initiatives. There was smart villages, then there was startup villages, and there is urban initiative, and there is etc., etc. So it will be good, and I'm also representing as a chair of Rural Pact Coordination Group, which is quite a unique body putting together European institutions and stakeholders organizations. And my colleague Patricia was taking pictures from the support office. So it would be maybe great to have some policy lab dedicated, to different studies, you are doing, because I think what I'm missing is that, I am seeing it today here, it's amazing, but, although I am reading a lot of things, to get the study, and your work, the research to the policymakers, it's quite difficult, and it would be really worth, because we can learn a lot from those, because sometimes you have to reinvent the wheel, and it's already done. So it would be great if you would somehow get in touch in cooperation with Rural Pact Coordination Group, and we would use what you produced in the real policy, because I think that would be the best to help the rural areas.
Thank you for the suggestion. I see notes being taken all around.